So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends, my dear students. I hope you are enjoying life, staying at home, and doing all sorts of fun activities. So, welcome, a very warm welcome to you in this second session. And some of the topics that we're going to cover today have been sent already to you. So, I'll just start off with the first topic, which is actually the first segment. So the first segment is regarding racism and the fact that where has our humanity gone when we see so many instances going all around, and it's not just in the US. We find racism being practiced in over centuries, and even today this has been the norm. Let's start by analyzing our own selves. We'll come to what has been happening in the US a little later. But I think let's start by our own selves, because this is the best place to start. So I think that first of all we need to understand that there is this general concept amongst our Muslim brothers and sisters that perhaps we are superior to other races of the world, to other religions of the world, to other people of the world. So I think that it's the first thing which is in order is that we must realize that this is a concept which is absolutely alien to the Quran, and the Quran does not at all condone the fact that we should regard ourselves superior to other religions or to the followers of other religions, simply because as far as the hereafter is concerned, it is God who's going to judge between people. We are no ones to judge other people. So you see, it starts right from ourselves. We Muslims, we might be very critical of the fact that these white Americans are persecuting the Afro-Americans, but I think that in a very subtle way, and in fact a very prominent way also at times, it is we Muslims who have been guilty of this. And amongst Muslims we find further divisions. So for example, we find Arabs. If you know Arabs, even on your internet, through your internet, you'll find out that these Arabs think that they are superior Muslims than the rest of the Muslims. And then we have a further division. We have the Sayyids who think that they are even better than the rest of the Muslims, because they think that they belong to the house of the Prophet and they are descendants of the Prophet, and hence they are much more superior and much more worthy than the rest. So I think that as far as racism is concerned, as far as regarding yourselves to be superior is concerned, it is a very common concept. You'll find this among other denominations as well. And I think we have to do away with it starting from our own selves. We must realize that as far as we are concerned, we are just ordinary human beings trying our best to live a life which is as close to righteousness as is possible. And we must not regard ourselves to be superior to any other Muslim. And then there is a third, I would say, division as well. And that third division relates to our appearance. And we Muslims amongst ourselves, so we make ourselves superior to other Muslims, or feel ourselves to be superior if we are wearing a certain apparel. Or for example, in the case of women, I'm not talking about all women, but generally women who wear hijab, they would regard themselves to be better Muslims or better off or far superior in the eyes of God than women perhaps who are not wearing the hijab. Similar is the case with men who might be keeping a beard or are dressed up in a certain way. They might regard, or they do regard at times, to be superior to other Muslims. So you see, these are so many divisions within our Muslims that we need to take care of first before we ever think of other people. And it is only right to start with your own selves. And as far as religion is concerned, as far as the Quran is concerned, it is absolutely clear. So the very first verse of the 4th surah of the Quran, which is Surah Nisa, it tells us that we have been created from the same mother and father, Adam and Eve. And hence the question of superiority just cannot arise. We are the children of a larger family. We are the progeny of Adam and Eve. All of us are spread out like that, and all of us converge on the top of that family tree, if I may call it, to Adam and Eve, which actually tells us that there is absolutely no difference as far as status as human beings is concerned. God did not create any human being superior to the other human being. They are all equal in status. And as far as how they fare in life is concerned, or how successful they are in life is concerned vis-a-vis the reward in the hereafter, only God can tell. And it is none of our business to judge people. It is none of our business to regard some superior and some inferior. It would be immensely wrong if we do so, because this is where humanity has to learn this lesson. And I think that one of the blessings, I would say, of these COVID times is that they have made us realize, this pandemic has made us realize that these boundaries have nothing to do with this divide. This virus does not know any division between races and castes and creeds. It's attacking everyone, and it is telling us, it is teaching us this lesson that as a community, as humanity, we stand at the same plane, at an equal plane, and we have to get together, we have to look after each other, we have to feel for other people as we feel for our own immediate selves. So you see, this is one thing that we have to realize, that this question of superiority, or this question of racism, this question of regarding yourselves to be more worthy, is always a question which actually emanates from our own internal superiority complex, or our feelings of superiority complex. And religion has, specifically speaking of all divine religions, including all Abrahamic religions, it has absolutely done away with that and made us realize that we have to think for our own selves. Let's not think of what others are doing and how they are doing. We have to regard ourselves to be a very humble people before the Almighty. We cannot judge people by their appearance, and we should not. We cannot judge people simply because they belong to a particular family or to a particular race like Arabs, or to a particular caste like the Sayyids, because in the eyes of God, as human beings, all of them are equal. And we can extend this to all humanity. It's not just within Muslims, but outside Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, all of them, they stand at the same level, at the same line as any other religious followers are concerned. So this is the first thing that I would say, that this slogan which we should put forward today is humanity first. So we have to come together as human beings on one plane and disregard these divisions of caste, creed, geographical boundaries, ethnic boundaries, because they might be a means of identifying ourselves from the rest, but they can never be a means of regarding ourselves to be superior. And this has been happening, as I said, all around in history. So just about 100 years or so ago, we find Hitler doing all sorts of heinous things, and when he had that genocide conducted against the Jews, and when he regarded the Aryans to be superior, it was just one manifestation, a hugely heinous manifestation of this concept of racism that manifested itself. In our own area in the subcontinent, we find, for example, India still practicing the caste system even today. Can you believe it? Even in today's times, it's 2020, and people have tried to do away with a lot of racist things, but here again we find people being divided because of their caste. So they are Brahmins, they are Vaishyas, they are Kshatris, and we have the untouchables, the Shudras, and they still live a miserable life. They still are executed, they are killed because they cannot live at par with certain other sectors of the society, and therefore they are not given this opportunity. And if at all they infiltrate into the higher strata of the society, the simple answer to them is to kill them, because they have done a big wrong. It's a sin for a Shudra to go into the higher strata of the society. So you can see a bunch of people, over 1.5 billion people, inflicted with this huge caste system even today. So it goes on, and you might be remembering that Gandhi had actually renamed the Shudras as Harijan. So Harijan actually means children of God. So in order to raise the standards of Shudras so that they are not maligned, so they are not thought as people of a lower caste or a lower human race, he actually called them children of God, so that the concepts might change regarding how we view such people. Now, coming to what has been happening in the US in the last 2 or 3 weeks, in spite of the fact that this pandemic had a strong message conveyed through the governments to all peoples that they should not come out in these circumstances because it's extremely dangerous to life. But look what happened. People totally flouted these restrictions. They were so angry. And this anger, actually, you need to understand, if you've been following history and world politics, that it was building up. George Floyd just became a case in point. And things were already happening there. And it was like a nail in the coffin, which really made things really go berserk. And even now, even just about a couple of days ago, on June 19th, which is we know the end of slavery in 1865, June 19 was the date on which slavery formally ended in the US, and it was just celebrated 2 days ago by actually catapulting the statue of a famous person who actually belonged to the anti-slavery movement or the slavery movement. He was in favor of slavery. So these are sentiments that keep building up, and simply because we have missed the bus, I would say, in this particular area, and that is that we must not segregate people, we must not differentiate between people, because this is something which is so unbecoming, it is so unearthly, I would say. It's against our humility. We should understand that we stand nowhere as far as human beings are concerned. We must realize that it's not the appearance, it's not the color of our skin, it's not the language that we speak, it's not the religion that we follow, it's not the social overview that we profess that has to do anything with our stature. As far as stature is concerned, the Quran and all Abrahamic religions have made it absolutely clear that it is the righteousness found in your own hearts that's going to be ultimately responsible for your fate in the hereafter. So instead of concentrating on what's happening in the world, of course these events do disturb us and we do feel very, very let down, but then we have to rise, we have to get up, we must find ourselves a foothold in which we must first of all look into our own selves and see whether we are guilty of this or not. And then, of course, what best can be done, the awareness that we need to create even amongst our own families who might regard themselves because of certain brotherhoods and castes, and as I said, certain creeds within our Muslims to be superior. So I come to an end to my first segment here with this pain in my heart, this anguish, this agony that we need to come out of these things, and starting from our own selves. We must eliminate this difference. We must regard ourselves to be equal. We are so vulnerable, and we keep doing things which are so which we might be ashamed of. And I think we should have ample time in analyzing what wrong that we are doing vis-a-vis regarding ourselves to be superior, than to even think of maybe other people. So concentrate on our own selves, regard ourselves to be very, very humble people, never judge people in any manner, because you see, as I said, the biggest thing is that appearance can be misleading. It is often misleading. What you look at when you look at a person, you just see what he is from his outside or her outside. You just cannot know what he is or she is from his or her inside. And a person is beautiful when he's beautiful from inside. Please do remember that. And I think it's a very powerful slogan, that a person is beautiful when he or she is beautiful from inside, not outside. Appearance does not matter. Color does not matter. Creed does not matter. Religion does not matter at all when this thing comes into play, simply because we think that we have been chosen by God, or maybe we are the last ummah of the prophets. That also does not warrant us to think regarding as if we have already earned salvation from the Almighty, because the Almighty says that even if you are born as a Muslim, you have to come up to certain standards if you want to receive reward from me, and that those standards are constant. They are not only for Muslims, they are for all mankind, all humankind. And finally, do remember that the book that you read, which is the Quran, is not the first book of Islam or the first book of God. It is the final and the last book of God, and it's not just for Muslims, it is for every human being. And when you look at this this huge message that it's for every single human being. It is for people who can really read it. It's not just for Muslims who just start to read it, and that too while unfortunately not understanding it. It's a universally revealed book for every single person. And what I've just said is my understanding of this holy book. And I do hope and think and pray that inshallah, when you read it more deeply and keep on reading it, you'll find the same message being conveyed to you, which will broaden your outlook, which will inspire you to become neighbors, and which will in fact make you citizens of the globe. You're not just citizens of Singapore or Pakistan or the US or UAE. No, you must regard yourselves to be citizens of the globe. You're part of this global family, this big, happy global family, and we should be proud that we are members of that family. Okay, so let's move on now to the next part of our youth session. And I think here that I would like to express this, in fact, it's just a continuation perhaps of our previous session, because here we talk about self-improvement. So our second segment actually revolves around the fact that how can we become better individuals? How can we improve ourselves from inside? Remember, we just finished the first segment by saying that a person is beautiful from inside. So how can we become beautiful from inside? How can we become souls who can leave a mark when they pass away, who people are really proud to associate themselves with, who people look up to? So this is the topic that we're now going to discuss. And I think again here, the tip that I'm going to give, or the experience that I'm going to share with you, is that if you have to become a better individual, then there is only one way to do that, and that is self-accountability. Self-accountability, as you know, is a simple phrase which tells us that you analyze your own follies and mistakes. And for that, let me give you a few tips so that you are able to maybe go along with that. First of all, you see, I would say, as the title of this segment, that the best way for self-improvement is self-evaluation or self-accountability. And the first tip that I'd like to give to you in this regard is that fix a time of the day in which you analyze what you've done the whole day. And I think the best time would be the time when you go to sleep at night. Even if it's 5 a.m. in the morning, that doesn't matter. You just cast a look at what you did in the last 24 hours and what you lost and what you gained and how many people did you hurt, and all sorts of bad things that you did in the last 24 hours. And that will actually give you an idea of the fact that these are some of the things that I need to work and maybe improve myself. So the first thing is to make a list of those things that you'd like to improve. Of course, even before that is the will to improve. But once you are a person who would like to improve, who has the will to improve, the methodology is that you may start making a list of things. And it's not just you pick up the pen and do it right now. No, the best thing would be that these things come up every now and then, and there's a pattern in our lives in which we find certain things or certain bad habits within us. So every night when you analyze yourselves as what you've done, maybe you've been rude to your parents, maybe you have your eyes have taken liberty, and all sorts of other things have maybe done which are not very, very decent. So you are able to gauge yourself that this is how I'm going to improve myself, that this is a list. Because you see, when you start off, the best thing is to realize the problem, and the more the realization, the easier to go about it. So that was the first step. The second tip is always remember that the bad habits that we have, that we make a list of every day, they are not going to go away right away. It's not that you realize at night, oh, this was the bad thing I did today and I'm not going to repeat it tomorrow. Let me tell you, in fact, you might be repeating that bad thing even more tomorrow, because you see, this is one of the tricks of Satan, that he would like to induce you to even more bad things the next day. And so therefore, it's a constant process. Don't always remember that self-evaluation, it's not just a process which is going to finish with time. No, it's going to go on, and it's going to continue till your last breath. I always compare this process to cleansing our houses. You see, dust continues to settle in our houses. Every now and then we clean our houses, we vacuum them, we do all sorts of things. We call these cleaning people, because we know that periodically, however much we may clean a house, it's still going to get dirty because of various environmental factors. And so this process goes on till our life. We continue to clean our houses all the time, till our life ends. So very similarly, our hearts are also like small houses and rooms. The dust of bad habits keeps settling in those rooms as well. And you need to have a continuous process in which you can filter them out, you can cleanse them. So the second tip is that you have to do this persistently and consistently. So the first thing was that you have to fix a time. The second is that you must do it persistently. It should be part of your life. You should always think that this is something that you need to do continuously. And if you don't do it consistently, things might still not go away the way you plan to. And the third thing is that never get frustrated, because you see, when you aim for a target that I am not going to do certain things in life, I am not going to do those things in life, what happens is that you get frustrated because at times you are not able to overcome your commitment. So never get frustrated, even if you are analyzing yourself continuously and doing the same habits or bad habits, repeating them every now and then on the next day. Don't get frustrated, as I said earlier, because this is something which is going to take time. Habits are not on and off processes in which you just push a button and they'll go away or turn it off. They're going to take time. So never get frustrated. Start afresh every day. A fourth tip that I'd like to mention here is that take a periodic feedback from maybe your friends, maybe your colleagues, maybe your brothers or sisters. Tell them, ask them to please tell you that how do you think that I am as a human being? What are my shortcomings? What are my strong points? So you see, a good feedback from your peers, from your friends, from your brothers and sisters is also going to help you a lot, because you see, they are your mirrors. You see yourself in a mirror, and you see yourself in your brother and sister or friend or colleague, because he or she is going to tell you what is at times wrong, and you might not realize it. You see, your true sister, your true well-wisher, your father, maybe your mother, whoever, I'm not just singling out anyone, just anyone you trust, anyone who you really trust, he or she could really be very helpful in pointing out certain things, and listen to that very, very carefully. You might not agree with her, you might not agree with him, anyone. I mean, you have all the opportunity and all the freedom to reject the criticism, but you must give an ear to that, because you see, when you're hearing criticism from a friend, you are actually finding out the truth, or trying to go as close to the truth as possible, because friends are always your well-wishers. They will not fake something. So I would say that this is a very, very interesting topic. It's of course a topic in which all of us must be inspired to go into, because you see, we all want to become high achievers in life, don't we? We'd like to become better professionals. We would like to become good doctors, good engineers, good painters, good musicians, good accountants, whatever our field is. So there is another field in which we need to become high achievers, and that is to become a good human being. We just talked about it a little while ago. So to become a good human being, to become a very good human being, of course, or become a high achieving human being, this is the thing that I would wanted to suggest, that please make a list of your flaws, make a list of your shortcomings, and as you say that well begun is half done. So if you begin it in a way that you would like to really do something to become a person who can inspire others, who can make a difference on the people who are around you, who can contribute something to the society, who can become a person who is in a leadership role, who can influence other people, who can really, really make a difference in the lives of the society. This is a very important thing, because you see, people get inspired from good human beings. They don't get inspired from people who are evil, because of course this is an obvious phenomena. You have to become a person who is really, really looked upon, who is people really love that person for his or her ideals. So this much for the second segment. I mean, the first and the second segment, as you know, are very close to each other. The first one was that we have to be equal human beings and on equal footings with everyone. And now in this second segment, I tried to explain that how we can become good by simply analyzing ourselves and launching an all-out effort, just as we do in preparing our exams. In our professions, we spend the night and we do all sorts of activities. In fact, we give up all sorts of activities to become to focus on our mission, to focus on our ideals. So on a very similar note, focus on your mistakes, focus on your bad habits, root them out one by one, and you'll find yourself to be a person who is really, really sought after, not only in this world, but you'll find the Almighty being very, very happy with you. So bless you all for this. The third, as far as the third segment is concerned, I'm shifting gears very frequently so that I am able to gauge your attention and you don't get bored by these sermons. There's now a shift. I'm going to go into my third gear, I think. And the third gear, could you remind me what was the third point that we need to discuss?
It's about keeping pets.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is something, I mean, which could interest many of you, and the reason that actually I put this segment here was that one of your, I think, participants in the previous session asked about, can we keep dogs as pets, or the fact that keeping dogs as pets is something which is perhaps not pleasing in the eyes of God and His Prophet. So let me just start off by saying that as far as keeping pets, now I'm talking first in general terms. Let's come to the dog issue in a while. So as far as keeping pets is concerned, it is absolutely not a problem. You should and you can and you must, if you are able to keep these pets, because you see, when you keep a pet, you develop a bond with that pet. And it makes you a responsible person. It teaches you responsibility. So you see, one of the most, I would say, sought after traits of a person is that he or she should become a responsible individual in life. And looking after a pet exactly makes you a responsible individual, because it teaches this habit in you that you must look after the needs of the pet. Maybe that pet would be needing food, maybe he needs a walk, maybe he needs to be potty trained, maybe he has all kinds of other needs, maybe he has a vaccination routine that must be followed, because all these things are very, very important. And I always say this, that you care for a pet the way you care for your child, maybe your own baby sister or maybe your own baby brother, because you see, animals, they are living beings and they need to be cared. You see, I see my people around me, children around me, they are very, very enthusiastic in having a pet, and as soon as the pet comes along, at times they are not very aware to its needs. They don't attend to that pet, and that pet becomes miserable. And the most miserable case that I have seen of pets is regarding birds which are caged. Remember, the most important thing that you must provide a pet is the environment in which he or she has been living, the natural habitat. And I am not very much in favor of caging birds, because of the fact that this is something that we do for our pleasure, and they were created for the skies, to soar in the skies, to traverse the skies. And when we cage them in a small cage, which of course is nowhere near their natural habitat, it's like being oppressive to them. Imagine yourselves being confined to just your own room and not being able to get out all your life. How would you feel? How miserable you would feel. So I think that first of all, the most important thing is that the pet that you keep must be having the same habitat as would be the natural habitat. So I would say that this is a very difficult thing as far as birds are concerned, as far as these animals are concerned, because they simply cannot be confined to small cages. Of course, in zoos we have very large cages, but even they lack a lot of facilities in many a time, and we see these birds, and we see so many species of birds helpless in those cages, because they cannot do anything for themselves. They are totally dependent on ourselves. So imagine their plight. Imagine how they would feel. Imagine how you would feel if you had been in their place in a cage and confined to that cage for all your life. So keeping pets, of course, is very inspiring. You are very entrusted, but being responsible for them the way you are responsible maybe for your own siblings, your kid sister or your kid brother, it requires a lot from you. And if you're able to do that, believe me, you'll become a very, very responsible person. So I do encourage, I would say, keeping pets is a very good thing. But then these pets must be looked after in a way that you are able to take care of all their needs. They have emotional needs, they have physical needs, they have medical needs, all sorts of needs. So please be careful about all these needs. So this is a general sort of a statement regarding pets. But now coming to the issue of dogs specifically, because one of the most beautiful animals that you can keep as a companion is a dog. And I myself used to have a dog, so I know what it feels like and how a dog, if it is properly trained, can really be a splendid companion, how you can become attached to that companion, and what exactly is the benefit of that companionship that you derive for your own self. Here it needs to be understood that look what the Quran has said. You see, the first instance, or the first I would say sentiment that we are transferred from our parents is that dogs, they are impure, napak hain, they are paleed, they should not come near you, they should not touch you, because their saliva, when it touches you, it breaks your wuzu, it makes your clothes impure. But look what the Quran has said. The Quran is saying an entirely different thing. It says that you can let loose these dogs on prey that you hunt. If they go and they just catch your prey, pounce upon that prey, you don't even need to slaughter that prey, because the teeth of the dog could be considered, or are considered to be that very knife which is going to kill that or slaughter that prey if the blood all oozes out. The only thing is that you must release that dog by saying Bismillah Allahu Akbar, which means you have God's permission to hunt that animal. So if the saliva of a dog was impure, you can just imagine how could the Quran have said that you can release a dog who could run all the way, catch the prey, and therefore if at that all the blood of the animal dies as a result of the wound inflicted by the dog, you don't need to slaughter it by a knife. This is what the Quran says, and it actually uses a word which tells us that this is one of the pieces of knowledge which God has taught you. Mukallibin is the word which the Quran tells us. So the first thing is that as far as this impurity thing is concerned, that dogs are impure, I think this has to be done away with. And in a manner, we have been treating dogs very badly, because we think that maybe a cat is much more pure, or some other animal is much more pure, but as far as a dog is concerned, he should be kept, or she should be kept far away from us, because his or her saliva is something which is going to make us impure. Now, the second thing is that there are certain narratives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam which say, for example, one of them says that that angels do not trespass, that angels do not come into houses in which dogs are kept. Now you see, as far as these narratives are concerned, you first of all, if you gather all the narratives of this topic, you'll find out that there was a dog in the times of the Prophet who would often frequent his house and come beneath his bed and would lie there, and he would actually eject, and he would dirty the place by secreting and by his excretions, and the Prophet would not know that. And it was on such occasions that he was being told that untrained dogs who are not even potty trained, who just do whatever they like, under the bed, and you don't even get to know what's been done. If this is the case, then angels are not going to come into the house, because this is something very, very they are very sensitive to such things. Even maybe when we find a dog dirtying the place with all sorts of things, especially if he's not potty trained, we would not like to go into that house, and angels have a superior sensitivity towards that. So it is very important that you study the narratives with all their details. So we have done that study. You can read about that study in detail. I can send it over to you. At the moment, it's in the Urdu language. For those of you who can read in Urdu, I can send it over to you, because all these narratives, they have a context. They are not absolute narratives which tell us that any angel is not going to go there. All it says is that angels would not enter those houses which keep untrained dogs. And the other thing which is also important from these narratives is that when the Prophet got to know that this was a dog it was actually a puppy who would come frequently and lie beneath his bed, he actually washed that place through a lot of water, so that it could just do away with whatever that puppy had done. So that is the first thing. The second thing in this regard that needs to be understood is that there is another narrative which tells us that there was a dog who had actually eaten from a utensil found within the house. And the Prophet, when he came to know it, he actually advised that that utensil should not only be washed, it should also be cleaned by mud and washed 7 times, as if implying the fact that a dog is impure, because what's the need of washing it so thoroughly by mud and by water so many times? Now, if we gather all these narratives once again, we'll find out that that particular dog was in fact inflicted by rabies and by some other diseases, which of course were contagious, and human beings could contract those diseases. So therefore, this second narrative, in which is often quoted against keeping dogs, is that because they are impure and the Prophet actually washed that utensil so many times, it tells us that their tongue and their saliva is impure. Again, has a context. It does not relate to all dogs. It relates to a dog who was diseased, who was sick, and he, in all probability, had what we today call rabies. In those times, of course, we never knew what rabies was, but we knew the signs, what a rabid dog is. And then there is a third type of narrative, or a class of narratives, which say that you must kill all the dogs that come, especially these black dogs. This is again something that is found in some narratives. Now again, if you analyze all these narratives, you'll find that they speak of certain stray dogs who were causing nuisance in Medina. They would not have doors the way we have today. They will just have curtains in those times which separated a house or a room in the house, and you just could enter the door of any house. So these dogs would just come in and they would cause nuisance, and the Prophet said you just kill these dogs, just as any administrator of maybe a city or a town would say that because they are causing nuisance, so you have them killed. So these are some of the narratives. I have not covered all of them. There are some others as well which have a similar meaning, but if you would like more details, I can provide them to you. But in a nutshell, what I wanted to dispel was that keeping a dog is absolutely the same as keeping a cat. There's nothing different. The only thing is that you must train a dog to be a decent individual when he's living in a house, and not do all sorts of things the way we just found out. So if we are able to do this, if we are able to make this, then keeping a dog within the house, outside the house, as a pet, as a guardian, as a security. For example, in the West, we have these shepherd dogs. We have these companion dogs which live in the house with old people, and they are really, really helpful for them. They take them for walks. I have seen myself a certain dog who was helping an 80-year-old widow living alone in an apartment. He would go and fetch certain items. When that lady would say, okay, get me that, he would go and get that particular thing from the house. So these are shepherd dogs, these are companion dogs, which would really make your life very easy if you do that, if you have them as pets and in old age. And even if you're not in an old age, in a young age, if you want to keep dogs, there is nothing as far as the Sharia is concerned which prohibits dogs. And just keep this bottom line in your mind, that if it had been impure, the Quran would never had asked for these hunting dogs to just be let loose on the prey and hunt the prey, and their teeth would be piercing the meat of that prey. And the Quran is telling us that even if the blood goes, it drains out, then consider yourself that the teeth of that dog have acted as a knife, as a slaughter knife, which has slaughtered the dog, and obviously the saliva would have been sticking, would have touched the body and the meat of the prey, which of course tells us that there's no such thing as an impure saliva of a dog. So as far as keeping dogs is concerned, I think we should vindicate these poor individuals that we have been treating or mistreating at times, and not realizing the fact that there is nothing against these dogs in the Sharia. I'm sure that many of us might not been even aware of this information that I've just given you, but this information was given to you so that you can maybe not argue, but reason out with your parents to tell them that there is absolutely nothing wrong if a dog is properly trained, if he is kept as a pet in a very, very polite way, in a very, very loving manner. I would encourage you to do so. Of course, it has to be in a way that your parents don't feel uncomfortable, but if they have any religious reason, they could have some other reason which you could maybe talk to them. But if they have any religious reason that dogs are not allowed, I think that you can convince them and tell them that this is a grave misconception. Okay, so changing gears once again, the fourth gear. And if I remember correctly, the fourth topic that we're going to discuss today is again relates to something very common. And maybe as individuals you might have heard this from your parents also, or maybe the society in which you live in, that painting or drawing portraits of living beings is something which Islam forbids, or the Quran forbids, or the Hadith prohibits. So therefore you should not draw pictures of living beings, you should not take pictures, you should not hang these pictures, and if you're praying in a room in which there are pictures, you must cover that picture maybe, or just take it off. And therefore if you do that, if you don't do that, again the same thing is told to you, that angels would not come to your house, because angels don't trespass, they don't enter a house in which pictures are hanging, especially of living beings. Again, this is a hadith which is being quoted. Now let me also explain the background of this narrative. As you must have till now gathered, to understand a hadith, it's essential that you gather all the variant texts of that hadith, because if you just pick out one text and then start to interpret it, you might end up on the wrong side, because each narrative leaves out certain details which other narratives cover. So you must have a complete picture. Now what has happened is that in certain narratives it has been said that pictures should not be made, and if you make these pictures, then on the day of judgment you will be asked to inject life in these pictures, because you painted a person who was a living being. So if you do so here, then in the hereafter you'll be asked to actually inject life into that picture, and of course it would of course be a cause of humiliation. Now and again, there are certain other narratives in which these details are not given as to why we have been stopped from making these pictures, for example. Now, as I said, there are certain other set of narratives which make the matter absolutely clear, and that is that in the times of Arabs, in the Arabian times, there were certain pictures and statues and sculptures which took the shape of idols. They were being worshipped. So people would bow down before them, they would regard them to be gods, to be demigods, to be deities, and they would worship them, and they would think them to be alive, and hence they would just present their salutations to them. They would pray before them. They would ask for their prayers to be fulfilled before them. Now, another class of narratives, another class of hadith tells us that the Prophet was actually pointing towards such pictures which people worship or used to worship in those times that are being forbidden. So the words in Arabic are hazihi sur or tilka sur, which means such kind of pictures, these kind of pictures. So not all pictures, not all portraits, but pictures and portraits which you used to worship, they should not be allowed, and you must not make such pictures, you must not make such idols. This is what the Prophet was telling us. Unfortunately, because of this the context eluded many of our scholars, and they thought that the prohibition of pictures is for all times, for every type of picture, without realizing that the prohibition was only for those pictures which were treated as gods or semi-gods or lesser gods who would actually be intercessors to the great God. So it is here that we need to understand that the prohibition is of paintings or pictures which might be presented to you has no basis at all. You can take pictures, you can draw pictures of living beings, you can paste them on the walls, you can do anything with them, of course, as long as they are not vulgar, because that's another thing that we must always be very careful of. But drawing any sort of pictures or making a sculpture of any form is absolutely fine, because the prohibition in the times of the Prophet did not relate to all types of pictures or statues or idols. It actually related to those which were worshipped. So we had the pictures of Abraham and Ishmael being hung from the Kaaba. Of course, they were imaginary pictures, but no one knew what Abraham looked like or Ishmael looked like, but they would make these imaginary pictures and hang them from the Kaaba. And they would have these winged angels, and these have winged horses, that the way we have in mythology, and then they would just prostrate before them. So remember, again, this is a question of misinterpretation, just as this was the same question which had arisen in our previous segment regarding dogs. Without realizing the context was about certain types of dogs, and without realizing that the saliva of the dog is absolutely the same as any other animal, because of the fact that we were not able to gather all those narratives we made a wrong interpretation. So very similarly here also, the same issue has arisen. We have not been able to gauge the fact that certain types of pictures were forbidden, not all types of pictures. So today, if you want to become a painter, if you would like to paint and draw, or you want to become a sculptor, or of any sort, and if your mama or your papa or your family members stop you because of religious reasons, you can tell them, well, it has an entirely different background. It does not relate to my paintings or my sculptures that I make, but it has a very specific background. So now I think we finished our 4 segments by now. Just to summarize, we discussed racism in the first segment. In the second segment, we discussed certain tips and techniques how to improve ourselves. In the third segment, what did we do? Any one of you? What will you do in the third segment?
Third segment was keeping.
I'd like to know from our. Okay, so the third segment was that we discussed about pets, especially dogs. And the fourth segment, of course, is regarding pictures and portraits. So it's now absolutely open. The forum is now open to you, and Ghazal is now going to proceed with the questions that have been raised and asked, and we can just have a very friendly exchange, hopefully, inshallah.
Thank you so much, sir. So first question is from Zohaib. Ahmed, Zohaib, please unmute yourself and ask your question. And before you do that, just let me tell other participants that you can raise your hand. If you click the participant option, you'll see the raise hand logo or option there. So please use that. Thank you. So please, Zohaib, go ahead and ask your question. Zohaib, we can't hear you. Just make sure that you are unmute. I'll come back to you. Let's move to the next participant, and then let's see if the system is working fine. So next in line is Hamza Ahmed Ranja. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a question regarding the first session. It was told that we should consider all the human beings equal. So in a few days earlier, we know that there was a Sikh actor from India who committed suicide, and there was a lot of controversy going on the social media that what should be our behavior towards non-Muslims. For example, if a non-Muslim dies, or as a Muslim, we are allowed to pray for them, or pray to God that may Allah grant them Jannah, or may Allah forgive them. And at the same time, we are also told by the society that we are not even allowed to say Assalamu alaikum to even a non-Muslim. And in the Holy Quran, we read such ayahs that these Jews and these Christians will never be your friend. So you don't have to consider them as your peers. So what should be our behavior towards non-Muslims, and how to deal with these things? Thank you.
So thank you very much, Hamza. It's a very good question considering what has just happened. Let me just give you an answer first to your question, and then we'll discuss some of the Quranic verses or ahadith which you have pointed out, which actually seemingly tell us that we have to be harsh and rude towards non-Muslims. So as far as my understanding of the Quran and hadith is concerned, you can pray for every human being when he passes away, regardless of his faith, because you see, when you pray for the forgiveness of someone, it is your request before God. Now, and the request, of course, is with this condition, with this recommendation that, oh God, if he had done something wrong out of ignorance, or he was not aware, please forgive him for that, and have mercy on him. So you see, when you're praying for someone, you're just putting forth your request, and there's absolutely no reason for not doing that, because it's not that God is going to accept your prayer come what may. He'll accept it on his own principles. But as far as we are concerned, we must be very, very very, very concerned with the afterlife of any human being, and we must pray whether he's a Sikh, whether he's a Hindu or a Jew or a Christian or even a non-believer. I mean, non-believers, of course, there could be a case made out of them, but as far as people who believe in God are concerned, or who even to our knowledge might not be having that belief, but because of the fact that we might just have this feeling about them that they are people who do believe in God. So we should present our petition before God for forgiveness, and this is something which is recommended. It is what we should do. It is in fact what Abraham did when he knew that his father would not be forgiven, and God had said that he is someone who has violated God's covenant as well and his promise, and he knew that what he's been doing is wrong. Even for him, Abraham was so concerned that he asked for his forgiveness. Now, as far as these verses in the Quran are concerned, there are verses. There is a verse which says that you must not pray for the idolaters, for the mushrikun. They have a very specific context, and that context actually relates to the fact that people who have intentionally denied the truth, intentionally denied God, intentionally, when I mean intentionally, it means deliberately. They are convinced, but they still deny. And it is about such people that God has had a very harsh attitude, because they are the people who are convinced from inside that what the truth is, but they would still not go along with it. And again, here the bottom line or the main question is that we cannot judge whether a person is deliberately denying or not. It was God who, in the times of His messengers, conveyed through wahi, through revelation, that such and such people or such and such group of people are intentional deniers, and hence they are not worthy of being made friends. They should not be paid salam, and of course then there are some other stipulations as well. So these related not to all non-Muslims. They just relate to a particular category of non-Muslims who existed, who still exist, but today we cannot pinpoint them. In the times of the Prophet, they were pinpointed through God, because you see, deliberate denial is something that we cannot know ourselves. It relates to the heart. It relates to your intent. In the times of the Prophet, God revealed this intent because He knows what is in the hearts. So He conveyed this intent through His prophets, and through His prophets, people of those times came to know that these are the people who have intentionally denied. So once the prophethood has been terminated, we simply cannot know whether a person is intentionally denying, or he's denying out of maybe ignorance, or maybe because of the fact that the truth has not reached him, or maybe he's confused. So this is the basic distinction that we need to make, and maybe inshallah we'll discuss this in more detail in some of the coming weeks. But the bottom line is that the Quranic verses which stop us from being sympathetic towards disbelievers have a very specific context. They relate to the immediate addresses of the Prophet there, because about them God had made it clear to the Prophet that these are the people who don't deserve any lenience. So once the Prophets have passed away, God does not now communicate to us, and therefore we today cannot know whether anyone is intentionally denying. Had it been known to us that there are people today who are intentionally, deliberately rejecting God, we might have not prayed with them. Because God has chosen this process to stop with the Prophet, the wahi has stopped with the Prophet, today we are not in a position to find out. So therefore today I would give this blanket statement that we should pray for every single person who passes away without any inhibition, because that prayer is basically our expression of sincerity, our expression of sympathy towards that deceased person.
Thank you so much. Next, Zohaib, can you go ahead again and see if your mic is working now? Please unmute yourself.
Hello, hello. Can you hear now me? Can you hear me now? So, sir, I want you to suggest us some books about selected hadith so we can read on the topics of music, keeping pets. As you said, we should read all the narratives, so we will get the topic in depth by. We will get into the depth of the topic by ourselves, so we can be more.
Right. I do understand. I understand. So we have a series of books on this that have been published. You can find them perhaps on the internet. So one of them, which I wrote, is called Common Misconceptions About. What's the book called? Common Misconceptions in Islam. And then there is a second book which is called Common Misconceptions About Women in Islam. Then there is a third one, which is misconceptions regarding non-Muslims in Islam, and it's actually called playing God. I think your course coordinator, session coordinator, will let you know of these. Maybe she can paste some of the names in the group chat, and you'll find out that where you can find them, and that would be something which would be accessible to you. And I think it's very good that what you've pointed out, that you need to maybe study such text for your own self as well, so that what I've said becomes your own view as well, because once you yourself study, and especially study the reasoning, you'll be able to understand why is it that we are stopped for certain things, and why is it that there are certain misconceptions which are prevailing, and we must be aware of them.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Nida Abbasi. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
I actually have a question regarding non-Muslims. So to explain the context, we are very fortunate to be born in a Muslim household, and we try throughout our lives to please Allah and emulate His Prophet and messengers. But when I look at my friends who are non-Muslims, they practice stuff which is, what their forefathers and their religions have told them, which is completely contradictory to our principles. For instance, idol worship, for instance, drinking alcohol. My question is, how is it fair that they are punished in the afterlife for following, their religion, where the only thing that differentiates between us and them is that we are born in a Muslim household, whereas they are not?
Right. So, Nida, thank you very much. It's a very good question and a very pertinent question. So, you see, as far as being born in a Muslim family is concerned, we first need to realize that it does not at all guarantee that we are going to be rewarded in the hereafter, or maybe we're going to be saved in the hereafter, unless and until we fulfill certain conditions. And those conditions are constant for all humanity. And the bottom line of those conditions, before we go into those conditions, is that we must have a sincere passion to find out the truth. We must have this sincerity in us that we would like to find out that what's going on in this world, these basic questions, that why I have been sent in this world, what is my reaction to the fact that I'm going to die, what will happen after that. So these basic questions which pull and push everyone, a person must be a seeker of the answers to these questions. And while seeking these answers sincerely, if he dies as a Muslim or a Christian or anyone, I do hope that God will forgive that person, because he has gone into that quest. He has launched himself or herself into that quest. The only thing is that people at times, they are misled or they are careless, they are carefree. So you see, being careless or carefree is something, whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim, is not going to help you, because you have to be a person who has this passion to find out what the truth is. And if you've just embarked upon that journey, it doesn't matter what your religion is, it doesn't matter even where you end up with, because this is the thing which is going to matter before God, that how sincere was that person in coming to me and finding out who I am. Plus, secondly, you also must realize that if the message of, for example, Islam has not reached them, there is another thing which has still they find in themselves, and that is every human being has the intuition, in his own intuition, finds the existence of a superior deity like God. You can call him anyone, you can give him a different name, but you do feel that there is someone who is looking after you, who's caring for you, who has created you. And secondly, you have your conscience, in which you know what right and wrong are. So people who do not find the message of Islam reaching them, or the Quran reaching them, they'll be held accountable for their innate knowledge of good and right, and for the fact that they did have a conception that there is a God, and they embarked upon finding how I can please God, but for some reason they could not reach him, or maybe they were misled, but at least they tried, at least they are trying still. So this is how we should view affairs, that as far as non-Muslims are concerned or Muslims are concerned, both have to be passionate seekers of what right is, and what these basic questions which are posed to every person, that who created us, where have we come from, where will we go after die, why is this world full of misery, why is there no injustice, why is it that we find God claiming to be merciful, but we find so many things which are not in line with mercy. So you see, if you try to find out these questions, you are on the right path. And whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim, it's inshallah going to earn you God's pleasure, I would say.
Thank you, sir. Next question is by Zara Wasim. Please unmute your mic and ask the question.
My question is regarding the dogs and specifically about their saliva. Because because we have a dog, and as like before namaz, for example, when we have our wuzu, and let's say the dog licks us, I've known that we're supposed to redo our wuzu, or at least wash over the place that it's been licked. But like, is that necessary? Because you said that their saliva isn't impure.
It's not necessary at all. You see, as I said, it's not me who is saying this. It is the Quran who says that when these dogs, they catch a prey, obviously their saliva is going to touch that animal. And the Quran says if the animal dies of the wounds inflicted by a dog, it is perfectly halal for you, implying the fact that the saliva that he would have touched with the meat of the animal that he was hunting, that dog was hunting, was absolutely fine. Otherwise, the Almighty would have said, oh, the dog, if he is caught a prey, he's torn apart a prey, don't go near it because its saliva is unclean, or maybe wash it completely because that is going to be something which is impure. This is something which God never said. And I think it has been, I don't know where it has come from, but the Quran and Hadith are absolutely clear that the saliva of the dog is just as the saliva of any other animal. It does not make your clothes impure. It does not warrant that you do your wuzu afresh. You can just do it. Maybe if you just don't like it, maybe you feel discomfort, you can wash it, but it's not a religious requirement. It could be your personal choice that you don't feel comfortable with it. But as far as religion is concerned, it does not ask you to wash that place or do that wuzu again.
Thank you.
Next question is by Ahmed. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. My question was that since our childhood we have been told that drawing pictures of living beings is haram, even though our objective is not to worship them. So please can clear that up.
So as I just tried to explain in the third or fourth segment, that these pictures related specifically to pictures of idols, pictures of statues, pictures of deities, which the Arabs used to worship in their times. And the Prophet was actually speaking of these pictures and telling them that because you think that these idols that you paint or these sculptures that you draw or maybe make by your own hands, because you think that they are deities and you think that they are alive, so on the day of judgment you will be punished for this because you are worshipping those pictures, and you will be asked to inject life in that particular thing that you thought was living. It was, of course, would be of a nature of a humiliation to that person, that you inject life because you thought he was living, you thought him to be a deity. Now, if you think he's living, make him a living being, and you will be punished for that. So you see, all this context is very clear. It relates to only those pictures which were worshipped in the times of the Prophet. It has nothing to do with the pictures that we today make or paint or draw. It's like your own family picture. It could be a self-portrait, it could be a portrait of anyone else, it could be a camera picture, it could be a WhatsApp picture, any sort of picture. It has no element of worship in it. When, for example, when you click, you make a snap of your mother, is it for the purpose of worshipping her? Of course not. When you make a click of your maybe any relative, is it for the purpose that you revere that as a religiously superior person who's going to grant you something? Of course not. So you see, these pictures and paintings had a particular context, and that was that only those pictures which had these religious emotions being drawn from people as if they have been regarded as deities, as helpers of God, as intercessors who would make you reach God, that were forbidden. These common pictures, these normal pictures, they are a means of communication, they are a means of entertainment, they are a means of a human expression, they are a means of creativity. So as long as they are not vulgar, of course, that's the condition that should always be there on all pictures. Pictures and portraits, the way I'm seeing you, the way you are seeing me, the way you're drawing anything, they are absolutely fine.
Next question is by Samin and Mahin. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I just have two questions. I just want to actually know where it's stated in the Quran about the dogs and the prey, like which verse that is. And then just the second one is that I have some Muslim friends and family who they have like a Buddha statue in their homes, but they've kept it as a decoration piece. So like I was just wondering, because they don't pray to it, but for another religion they do. Would that disapprove the angels from coming into their homes?
No, certainly not, because you see, it's just a sort of a decoration piece that they have kept. It's not that it has been kept for worship, so it's fine. It's like a relic. Many houses have this Buddha statue as a relic, as a piece that of decoration, so that's absolutely fine. As far as the first question is concerned, so I'll ask Ghazal to paste those verses, those words and the translation in the group chat, so that you are able to study it yourself as well. It's in the 5th surah of the Quran, which is Surah Ma'idah. So we'll have the exact verses for you.
Thank you.
Next in queue is Zain Malik. Then please go ahead and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
I just had a question regarding you were talking about context and how context is key. So based on that, how absolutely and directly can we interpret everything in the Quran and Hadith, given that you gave quite a few examples where you had to intensely scrutinize looking at different variations of Hadith and different perspectives. So then based on that, can we actually take anything literally from these texts, or do they require intense scrutiny?
So as far as the Quran is concerned, because we are supplied by the context, because the Quran has been preserved the way it was revealed, so we have the context. The only thing regarding the Quran that we need to do is that we should gather all verses of the same topic in order to make a complete picture, in order to form a complete picture. For example, the story of Abraham is related in the Quran on more than one occasion. Similarly, the story of creation has been related in the Quran on more than one occasion. So what you can do from the Quran is that when you want to have an opinion, or you want to form an opinion of the story of creation, for example, you should just gather all those 5 or 6 areas in which that incident has been discussed, put them together, and you'll find the complete picture. As for the Hadith is concerned, because our Hadiths are fragmentary reports, you see what happens is it's not always the case that the reporters, they report exactly verbatim, or maybe they find out that whatever they saw, whatever they heard is reported absolutely in a sincere and a faithful manner. What happens is at times just parts are transmitted. At other times what happens is, because there is a chain of narration, so there is a loss of transmission in that chain, because people comprehend what the previous person said to that person, and so on and so forth to the next person. At times that person might not be listening properly, at times he would forget details. So these are the inherent flaws of Hadith transmission, and one of the ways to overcome them is to again gather all the Hadiths of the same topic, make a complete picture, and then relate it to the Quran as well. Because you see, independently Hadiths cannot be taken or understood, because in spite of gathering all the topics of Hadith, you still might fall short, because you don't have the context completely, because there are many things which might not have been transmitted in the first place. So for that you need to collate it or study it in the light of the Quran, so that you are able to fit it how in the whole context of the Quran, how these ahadiths give you a complete meaning. It's slightly technical, of course, and it's not the job of every person. Scholars do that, and we have been doing this regarding various topics in our institute. So you'll find several examples in several books that have been published doing this, and it'll make you, if you go through them slightly, when you have more advanced knowledge, you'll be able to learn yourself this technique, that how you can interpret yourself with the help of scholars.
Thank you.
Rayan, you are next in the queue. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
My question was pertaining to the first section where you talked about racism. And I wanted to ask if in the Quran it is seen that there is the oppression of women, because normally we see like Allah, He is like we refer to Allah as He, and like there are also many
right
verses which like state men being the breadwinners of the house as compared to women, and women having to wear hijabs and such. So would you say that Quran to an extent does oppress women?
That's another brilliant question, and I am conducting a series on Wednesdays, which is called Top 20 Misconceptions About Women in Islam. So I'm dealing with these misconceptions one by one. Even if you're not awake at that time, because it's 12 midnight in Singapore, you can hear the recordings later on, and I'm going to go through this whole series in which this alleged postulate is discussed, that does Islam really oppress women? So maybe you can just go through that one by one, and also you can go through my book, which relates to the misconceptions regarding women in Islam, because there is a host of things on the basis of which this case is made out that women are inferior to men. So I would advise you to look up those readings, as well as maybe you can wait for those lectures. But as far as your first part is concerned, and that's a very interesting one that you have made, that why is it that God speaks of Himself in the male gender, and why is it that, because we know that God does not have a gender, and when He Himself revealed a book ascribed to Himself, He chose to be called or to be addressed by in the male gender, and why is it that He did not call Him to be a deity in the female gender? By the way, we do have a feminist approach to that, and we have seen there are translations of the Quran. Of course, there are ones in the Bible as well, in which the he has been replaced by a she by many feminists, because they think that it's a gross injustice to translate he, because we know that God does not have a gender. So having said that, let me answer this question by telling you that basically it's not a matter of gender as much as it is a matter of linguistics. So in the language, or in the culture in which this language was revealed, the male gender was always reserved for a deity, for a higher power. So it's not just the Arabs or just the Quran which has done so. If you read mythologies, if you read ancient religions, you'll find mostly, I'm not talking about Greek mythology, in which we have goddesses as well. I'm talking about certain remnants of ancient religions in which God is everywhere spoken in the male gender. For example, you find the Old Testament, you find the New Testament, some other books as well, in which the male gender is simply employed because the human perception of a God is that he is someone who has power, someone who has an expression of strength, and this is something which always comes out by attributing it or ascribing it to a male gender. Somehow mankind does not associate power and strength and might with the female gender. So you see, it's more of a linguistic thing. It's not that God has chosen Himself to be a male, or it's like something. It's more of the fact, because human beings in their own cultures have always regarded deities, have always regarded gods having power and majesty and grandeur, and power and majesty and grandeur and strength is something which humankind has always associated with God, with the male gender. It's only in the last couple of 100 years when feminism or the feminist movement has actually taken ground, and we find women actually complaining on these things. And very similar is why God sent prophets who are mostly males. We don't find, barring a very few exceptions, if you call Mary or Maryam to be a prophetess, that could be a point, but mostly all prophets of God have been male, they have been men. That's again because of the same phenomena, because in most societies which were patriarchal in their nature, in which in which the person who would guide them would always be thought to be a male gender. So in order to not change this human perception, because God works His ways through human beings the way they think and the way they perceive. So because human beings perceive God to be a he always, and because they would always regard a he from whom they would take religious orders, so God actually took care of this by addressing himself to be a he, so that it would not alienate himself, so to speak, and also sending prophets as males, not because he preferred males. So you see, preference of the male pronoun for God is not because he's preferring males because they are superior, or sending male prophets is not because he's thinking that males or men are superior, but because in those times and still today, we find majesty and grandeur and strength being conferred to the male gender, and orders and religious guides being mostly males. So it's like that human kind drawing into a certain, I would say, phenomena, passing through it, and God actually not doing something that would be a cause of alienation for the human race. So I think the matter is more linguistic in the case of the human pronoun for God, for the male pronoun, and more giving due regard to patriarchal societies in which males have always been people of this stature who would guide people. So this is like a religious thing. It's not something which is religious. It does not tell us in any way that women are inferior and therefore they were not sent as prophets, and women are inferior and therefore God did not address himself in the female gender. It has nothing to do with this superiority. It has to do with linguistics, and it has to do with the momentum and the mechanics of a society.
Thank you, sir. इससे पहले कि मैं कोई next question लूँ, I'm just speaking in Urdu और I'm trying to convey my message कि अगर आप में से कोई भी उर्दू में सवाल पूछना चाहता है, please go ahead. हमारी कोशिश है कि सवालों का जवाब दिया जाए. So please use whatever language you are more comfortable in. Thank you. Next question is from Sarah Khan. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Walaikum salam. So you might be, could you speak a little louder, please?
My question had nothing to do with the topics mentioned in this lesson.
Okay.
It's more one I just had in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is music haram in Islam? More specifically, I'm learning how to play the piano, and my parents are very encouraging of it, but other family members, they aren't fans of it. But my parents say it's just an extra skill set that I have, and I just wanted to know if I should do it or not.
So I'm really glad that you're learning piano, and it's a wonderful instrument. You must learn it. As far as this alleged prohibition is concerned, we just covered it in our previous session, and I think its recording is available in your group chat. You can just go through that part, in which I have shown that again this has been grossly misunderstood. As far as music is concerned, you can become a musician, you can sing songs. The only thing is that the content should not be vulgar. The content should not be something which is, these are of course songs. As far as instruments are concerned, there's absolutely no problem. You can go ahead and learn the guitar or the piano or the organ or the violin or the sitar, anything that you'd like to earn, and your parents are absolutely right that it's an extra skill set that you are actually gathering for yourself. Please do so. And the misconception that we have in this regard, that music is prohibited, I have endeavored to clear it up in that previous session. You might want to just listen to it.
Thank you, sir. Next question is by Rahim Yusuf. So Rahim, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah, so my question was regarding the permissibility of kosher meat, because I've read a few sources online. As far as I'm concerned, they say that it's allowed, but my confusion was when we cut meat to make it halal, we need to pray to God, but in the kosher meat it's a different prayer. So I was a bit confused about that.
So kosher meat is absolutely allowed, and the prayer that they take, the name of God is absolutely, it may be in a different set of sentences, but the meaning is exactly the same. They take the name of God, they seek His permission. So kosher meat is the same as any meat that you can eat from Muslims. It's the Jewish version of the halal meat, and it's perfectly permissible.
Thank you, sir. I have last two questions which have been sent over the chat. One of them is a follow-up question where we were discussing praying for the non-Muslims. So the question is about that when Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam was praying for his father, but Allah Ta'ala stopped him for doing so. What's the rationale behind it?
Is there? Okay. So, as I said, that in that case, God had informed him that he is a person who has deliberately denied and he is indulging in polytheism, and you should not pray, Abraham, for a person who is convinced of the truth and he's still not doing it. But in spite of God stopping him, Abraham never stopped and he did pray for his father. So you see, the reason that God stopped was that he said that a person who insists on polytheism, insists on worshipping more than one God, in spite of being convinced that it is wrong, such person does not deserve to be prayed for. So that is why God stopped him. And Abraham, out of his own paternal love for his father, said, I'll still pray for him. It's up to you to not forgive him.
Thank you. The next question is by Hafsa. She has asked that Islam does not prohibit us from many things, but we often practice them as a precautionary measure, as God tells us to not go even near to sins. For example, if I prefer not hanging the portrait because they make me uncomfortable and I feel that I might start treating those pictures as something supernatural. I'm just afraid, and similarly there are many other practices, but this is often given the name of extremism. So how do you deal with it?
It's a personal choice. If you think that this is going to maybe lead you to do something wrong, you have all the right not to do it. But again, do consider that as far as personal choices are concerned, you are absolutely free. But I think if you have confidence in your own self and if you are very aware of the fact that this is something which is not going to happen, even if you take a chance, I would not say that would be wrong. But as I said, if you feel uncomfortable, it is entirely up to you. And people who say that it's extremism, they are absolutely wrong. They should not label you in any way, because you're not being an extremist, you're just trying to be extra careful. So being extra careful is something which is always very, very loved by the Almighty. He likes such people who are extra careful. The only thing is that you should not regard this precaution to be applicable to all people, because you see there are other people who would think that for them such a precaution is not needed, and they are perfectly okay if portraits hang, because there's nothing in the whole wide world which would induce them to prostrate before a family member or a person whose portrait is hanging. So you should not make this to be a norm or maybe a condition for every person. Just your own personal precaution, and this is entirely up to you, and I would understand that if and people would, of course, should not do that, should not label you to be an extremist, but unfortunately this is what happens in our society, and the best that you can do is just to ignore them and just be true to your own self.
Thank you, sir. We have one more question by Zain Malik. So Zain, please go ahead and ask your question.
I just had a follow-up question regarding your analysis on the engenderment of Allah in the Quran. So is that a byproduct of local people perceiving His word and using their own patriarchal values, or is it Allah Himself who was right, who gave His message in such a way that they would understand it? Because I'm a bit confused as to why Allah would need to engender the message Himself if He's so powerful.
Yeah, it's basically the local perception. You see, the Quran was revealed when mankind had passed through so many centuries of patriarchal society, in which patriarchs were accepted as people or people who would regard their emotions or their religious sanctity, I would say. They would revere people or revere a God who is in the male gender, that God actually just went by this mechanics or this momentum of the society. And you see, the options were different. For example, he could have expressed himself in the female gender, that was one option. He could have expressed himself in the male gender, that was another option. Or he could have maybe used a third gender which is not available in Arabic, and he could have created that. So of course that would be something very I would say it would have alienated his concept, because you see, God wants himself to arise in a human being from within the language that you speak to him. And if you introduce a new gender for God, which of course would have resulted in a number of other problems, I think he chose to just express himself by selecting from between the two available genders, and by actually giving due regard to the fact that mankind has generally regarded God to be a person who has that power and majesty, and that can only be associated, it's not that it cannot be associated with the female gender, the only thing it can be more associated with the male gender, it can be more appropriate, I would say, for the male gender. It does not disregard the fact that women cannot be grand and they cannot have grandeur and majesty. It's just that the human perception is that when they are speaking to someone who is all powerful, so they have this vision that he has to be a male. So it's like going along with that perception.
I just had a follow-up, if that's okay.
Right.
So if Allah is like, if he's all about equality, then why couldn't he stress the fact that you don't need to express him as a male in his text? And
I do understand what you're getting at. Actually, you see, that's one question that maybe we can ask him when we meet him, because you see, what we are doing is trying to understand what he did. We are not in a position to dictate him, or we are not in a position to suggest that, oh, well, you could have done this, you could have done that. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying to understand it. Why did he do it? That's my explanation. I too would be maybe asking the same question as you have in your mind when we meet him, inshallah, one day, that what are the other choices that you could have adopted? But you see, at the moment, living in real life, the only practical solution is that we understand what he has done, instead of suggesting that he could have done such and such a thing. Because this is just going to be an academic debate or an academic discussion. He has already chosen one thing, and we need to understand that why did he choose that thing.
Thank you so much, sir. We have 3 more minutes. So I have one more question to ask. Somebody has asked out of the participants that, and it's in Urdu, कि अगर मौजूदा मुसलमानों का एक अल्लाह, एक पैगंबर और एक दीन है, तो ये फ़िरक़े क्यों हैं?
फ़िरक़ों की बड़ी वजह यह है कि इंसान अपने जहन को इस्तेमाल नहीं करता, अपने इमोशंस को इस्तेमाल करता है। फ़िरका वारियत नहीं पैदा हो सकती कि अगर आप इंटेलेक्चुअली चीज़ को मानें और दूसरे फ़िक्रे को टॉलरेट करें। फ़िरका तभी पैदा होता है कि आप जज्बाती तौर पे अपनी इमोशंस से आप किसी चीज़ को अटैच हो जाएं, आप कहें जी बस ये ठीक है, दूसरे गलत हैं। अगर आपके पास रीज़निंग होगी, अगर आपके पास इस्तदलाल होगा, इफ़ यू हैव रीज़निंग, तो आप क्या करेंगे कि अपनी बात को रीज़निंग से प्रेजेंट कर देंगे और दूसरे को मौका देंगे जी अगर आपकी मुख्तलिफ रीज़निंग है तो आप वो रख सकते हैं। तो फ़िरका वारियत की एक बड़ी वजह ये होती है कि जिसको आप कहते हैं ना सेल्फ राइटियसनेस, अपने आप को ठीक समझना, दूसरे को गलत समझना। तो आप ये कहते हैं कि भाई जो मैं समझ रहा हूँ बस वही ठीक है, दूसरा गलत है। तो अगर आप अपने कुरान ये कहता है कि आपने मजहबी हक़ाइक़ को समझने के लिए अक्ल इस्तेमाल करनी है, जज्बात नहीं इस्तेमाल करने। जज्बात इस्तेमाल करें अमल करने के लिए। तो अगर आप अक्ल इस्तेमाल करेंगे तो आपके अंदर ये चीज़ पैदा होगी कि मैं चीज़ समझूंगा, समझाऊंगा, दूसरे को मौका दूंगा और दूसरे को बर्दाश्त करूंगा। लेकिन चूंकि हम अक्ल इस्तेमाल नहीं करते, जज्बात इस्तेमाल करते हैं, तो हमारे पास फिर कुव्वत बर्दाश्त नहीं रह जाती।
So I think we'll call it a day. Thank you so much, sir, आपके time का, and thanks to all the participants for joining us here. Looking forward to seeing you all next week, same time, same day.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good week. Goodbye. Khuda Hafiz.